The many origins of the thunder god, Raiden. The conical hat, the white robe billowing in the breeze, the static of electricity flickering between the fingers before an abrupt, intense flash of blue light. For more than 30 years, that shape has often been presented as the ethical direction of Mortal Kombat. When we initially encountered Raiden in the hazy arcades of 1992, he was the Thunder God himself, an ancient divine force who understood what Earthrealm was up against more than anything else. But here's the thing the franchise spent years slowly revealing. He is also one of the most dangerous variables in the story. The Guardian of Earthrealm is likewise one of its greatest threats, even across multiple continuities. So, welcome back to our YouTube channel, guys, and today we are going all the way back through the 1992 arcade original, through decades of retcons and reboots, through a 2023 game that upends his entire identity while posing the question the franchise has consistently raised. What does it actually cost to be the one who guards the realm? Who is Raiden at his core? So before we delve into the timelines and multiverse reboots, it will be best to examine the baseline identity of Raiden, which stays true through almost every cosmic reset. To begin with, at his core, Raiden is the timeless god of thunder and the chief guardian of Earthrealm. While characters such as Liu Kang or Johnny Cage offer strength and provide the muscle, our character offers the insight, the vision. He is a strategist, a mentor, and a recruiter of great warriors who assemble to fight for the survival of their world. You know, visually, his design is one of the most iconic in the history of gaming. The idea came partly from co-creator John Tobias, who saw a statue of Raiden, the Japanese god of thunder, at the Field Museum in Chicago. They changed the name to Raiden. I didn't know that until now. Anyway, this character also carries those signature glowing eyes, can teleport, and shoots lightning. And all these things have not really changed since the 90s, even with all the development he has gone through. Not to mention, Raiden's greatest sadness is linked to his most powerful quality, his unwavering devotion. He is not just a god, but a god on a mission that often demands the impossible. Every time you see him, he is this calm, wise character who is collected and fair, and he is a mentor who makes you feel both respected and safe around him. But the crushing responsibility of being the only defender of a world on the brink against unimaginably powerful ancient gods, lost gods, and merciless sorcerers slowly wears him down, driving him down a path that becomes darker and more relentless. Raiden is a compelling tragic hero in fiction because he is fundamentally conflicted. Whether as a mighty god or a mere mortal fighting side by side with men, he always reminds us what it really costs to be on guard. Every hard choice, every moral gray area he enters, every line he crosses for the safety of everyone else, it all has a cost, and Raiden pays it all. Often he has to watch the world he sacrificed so much for suffer the consequences of his decisions. He is not defined by his power so much as by the brutal fight between his unshakable duty to protect and the terrible, often lasting damage done by his actions. Original Arcade 2D Timeline, MK1 to Armageddon. This is where it all starts. Back in 1992, Mortal Kombat rolled out Raiden with one of the simplest character descriptions in a fighting game. He was basically a god, the Thunder God, who got a personal invite from Shang. He then took on a human form to join the tournament and safeguard Earthrealm. That was pretty much it. No deep history, no sad past, no complicated beliefs. Just a god showing up because the situation demanded it. And honestly, that was the whole idea. The early arcade days had these huge blanks. I am talking about sparse character bios and abrupt endings, and this created a ton of room for the game's story to develop. Little did anyone know then that these spaces would eventually be fleshed out with some of the most drastic character evolutions in gaming. But for the initial period, Raiden was the heavenly protector, the unwavering constant, and the one Earthrealm turned to when things went south. By the time Mortal Kombat 2 came out, Raiden was playing a much more hands-on part. He kept an eye on Shao Kahn's schemes from high above and alerted the Earthrealm fighters before joining them in Outworld. He was no longer just a participant in a competition, he was a commander. And by the MK3 era, things escalated even further, when Shao Kahn forcibly merged Outworld with Earthrealm. As a god, Raiden was forbidden from interfering directly, so in Mortal Kombat Trilogy, he gave up his immortality to fight alongside Earth's defenders as one of them. Earthrealm survived, and Raiden eventually reclaimed his divine status. Then Mortal Kombat 4 and Gold took his story in a new direction. When Shinnok, a fallen elder god, broke free from the Netherrealm, Raiden found himself battling more than just tournament matches. He was facing an existential threat. This was the turning point where being the protector of Earthrealm shifted from a mere title to a genuine weight. The concept of Raiden standing between humankind and forces capable of destroying existence, that became his true narrative journey. But the original timeline's darkest turn takes place in Deadly Alliance and Deception. In Deadly Alliance, Liu Kang is murdered by Shang, Tsung, and Quan, and Raiden is unable to stop the Deadly Alliance. In Deception, when Onaga returns, Raiden unleashes his godly essence in a suicidal explosion that destroys the Deadly Alliance, but fails to stop the Dragon King. After that failed sacrifice, Raiden's essence reforms in Earthrealm, but he comes back corrupted, transforming into Dark Raiden, dark garments, crimson eyes, and a deity who has crossed ethical boundaries he cannot reverse. This is more than just a different shade, it's a whole new personality. The Protector is now ready to do whatever it takes. Then comes Armageddon. During the final showdown where every fighter from Mortal Kombat's history is involved, Raiden sees that the end is near. In the MK9 retelling of Armageddon's ending, almost every warrior has fallen. Shao Kahn has defeated Blaze, and only Raiden remains to send one desperate message into the past. Just 3 words: he must win. That single act is the turning point between the old timeline and everything that comes after. Without it, a fresh start would not be possible. Without it, there would be no Netherrealm era. This is where one story ends and another begins. Netherrealm Reboot Timeline, Mortal Kombat 9, X, and 11. This is Raiden's heartbreaking story, and it is a tough one. In Mortal Kombat 9 from 2011, we see Raiden get a message from the future saying, he must win. He senses disaster coming, but he has no clue who he or what winning means. So he tries to mess with history by making choices that one by one lead to terrible outcomes he did not plan for. The absolute worst is Liu Kang's death, which does not happen in a fight with an enemy, but comes from a tragic confrontation with Raiden. The very hero Raiden was trying to save ends up dead because of him. That is the gist of this entire timeline. Raiden's good intentions warp the future. The Guardian deity becomes one of the timeline's biggest destabilizing forces. Each effort to preserve Earthrealm demands a price greater than the last. Raiden's personality changes a lot in Mortal Kombat X. At the end of Mortal Kombat X, he confronts revenant Liu Kang and Kitana, drops a severed, still-living head as a warning, and makes it clear that Earthrealm will no longer fight defensively. He has become proactive, merciless, and really terrifying. This is not the Raiden who stood next to champions. This is the Raiden who determines life and death. So, Mortal Kombat 11 and its Aftermath add-on really tie things up. Kronika has been the keeper of time for a long time. She has been pulling strings because she is scared of what might happen if Raiden and Liu Kang ever join forces. Because of this, her time merger removes Dark Raiden from the board and brings in an earlier Raiden, who has to deal with what he could have become. But here is the way it is actually solved. Raiden and Liu Kang fuse their whole beings together. Raiden sacrifices his godhood to allow Liu Kang to become Fire God Liu Kang and basically rewrite reality. This is the most unselfish thing Raiden has ever done, and it is also the end of him as a god. This particular Raiden does not get a fairy tale ending. Instead, he gets an ending that actually means something. Mortal Kombat 1, Raiden as Mortal Champion. And so now we are talking about the Raiden who has changed the most in the history of Mortal Kombat, and honestly, it is probably the most interesting one. Raiden is not some old all-powerful god in this new timeline created by Fire God and Liu Kang. He is just a normal guy. He is an Earthrealm fighter. He is from the village of Fengjiang. He is a guy who grows rice, lives a simple life, and shares it all with Kung Lao. He has got a sister, a home, and a life that has nothing to do with gods or thunder. Liu Kang chooses him and gives him an amulet that unlocks lightning powers, making him Earthrealm's champion rather than a literal god. Just stop and think about how huge that transition is. Raiden was the god who chose mortals to fight for him for 30 years. Now a god is selecting him. The whole setup is completely inverted. Raiden begins at the very bottom, has to earn his power as the story progresses, and grows into the role rather than starting out as an immortal being that occasionally gives up his power temporarily for dramatic effect. It is all about the story of being humble and being lifted up in this version. It actually reminds you of mythic storytelling in a broader sense, an ordinary person being chosen, tested, and elevated into a role far larger than himself. And it works because MK1 is not trying to be a replacement for the original Raiden. It asks a question: what if he had no power at all? What if the Thunder God had to turn into one? Comic and extended lore. Mortal Kombat tie-ins flesh out Raiden's origin, role, and personality in great detail, although not as many as some other franchises. Let's have a look at what these are. One of Raiden's first major regular comic appearances was in 1994 when he appeared in issue number 1 of Malibu's Mortal Kombat Blood and Thunder. The first of these tells the story of the first tournament, and Raiden enters the story to lead and protect the warriors of Earthrealm. This backdrop did not profoundly change his known history, but it did add depth to his character, with more dialogue, more mentoring interactions, and clearer warnings about the stakes of the tournament. A point worth mentioning is how the Malibu comics really took their own way with Mortal Kombat. As mentioned earlier, Raiden was not actually there as a normal tournament fighter in the Blood and Thunder series because of his mighty status. Instead, he was a watchful mentor figure, hanging back and observing rather than jumping into the fight. Malibu had a lot of freedom to tweak the characters and send them down different paths than their video game selves, and the comic series had several different storylines going on throughout 1994. Raiden even got his own 3-issue spin-off, Raiden and Kano, which really dove into his personal beliefs. It highlighted how, while his fellow gods usually stayed out of human affairs, Raiden was always stepping in, trying to give the good guys an edge in their never-ending battle. In DC's digital-first Mortal Kombat X comic, especially the Raiden-focused material often discussed around the To Kill a God arc, the storyline focuses heavily on Raiden. This is not the original source of the character, but this arc is an emotional basis for the modern Raiden, as it shows his growing obsession with the need to stop godlike threats. It highlights the great remorse he has for his old mistakes and shows how far he is willing to go to eliminate any danger that could threaten Earthrealm or the gods themselves. Raiden is then corrupted by the Kamidogu, which are ancient daggers tied to blood magic and the one being's blood in this storyline. This causes him to attack Hanzo Hasashi and descend into near madness, shouting that chaos is on its way to Earthrealm. The arc also exposes important backstory about Raiden's post-MK9 decisions, and when the Elder Gods would not simply destroy the threat, he used divine blood and the Kamidogu in a desperate containment plan. It is a portrayal of a guardian pushed to the limit and already beginning to shatter. Raiden was fleshed out in the original MK comics, something the games could only allude to on the printed page between fights. A mentor character with actual emotional complexity could convey wisdom, doubt, and baggage through longer storytelling, not brief pre-fight chats. The comic books showed Raiden and Shang as sworn enemies, where Raiden was often depicted as someone unable to get directly involved in the matters of mortals, which made it hard for a god who wanted to step in eagerly but was held back. The comics gave him a clear sense of right and wrong, something the arcade game did not have space for. Later tie-in content, focusing on the MK9 and MKX period, further refined that characterization thoughtfully, highlighting his role as a conflicted protector struggling with the immense task of fixing a timeline he inadvertently created. These stories explored the moral complexities of his position, a protector who became both part of the source and part of the solution to Earthrealm's suffering, a god forced to face the unforeseen consequences of his desperate deeds in Armageddon. Raiden was now clearly portrayed in the lore as a god who battles to defend Earthrealm in spite of his previous mistakes, a framing that might have been odd in 1992, but by the MKX era, it had come to define his entire persona. In this regard, the comics and associated content of this era were less supplementary entertainment and more of an emotional deep dive into a character the games had only begun to explore. Over the course of Raiden's long lore, you get a much more nuanced and complex portrayal than any single game could express. The adaptations from comics to digital issues to ancillary stories chart the entire trajectory of a character who was once a lighthouse of divine certainty and was slowly whittled down to something a bit more human, uncertain, sad, and painfully conscious of his own shortcomings. They keep the mythos alive while breathing life into it so that Raiden is never merely a plot device or an exposition tool, but remains, through every medium that has attempted to tell his story, a fully developed character bearing the burden of a purpose he never asked for and has never once abandoned. Film and TV adaptations, Raiden on screen. Raiden's film origins often simplify his complexity to present him as a more conventional hero, often leaving out the disastrous repercussions of his decisions evident in the games. Christopher Lambert takes up the role of Raiden, spelled Raiden, R-A-Y-D-E-N, in the 1995 Mortal Kombat film adaptation, and he brings his own interpretation of the character, which ranks among the best interpretations that do not come from the game's universe. Rather than portraying Raiden's power and aggression as depicted in some later game material, Lambert chooses to portray him as the traditional wise mentor who is calm and, most importantly, authoritative, fitting right into the 90s style. He serves as the dependable leader who guides Liu Kang, Sonya Blade, and Johnny Cage through an unknown and bizarre universe. He achieves this by giving his protégés advice when appropriate and letting them discover their skills without solving all problems for them. The reason this interpretation works so well is the overall feel. Lambert's Raiden has a unique mix of dry wit and humorous demeanor, making him friendly without undermining his authority. He seems like the divine being who finds humanity's mess funny, but is fully aware of the dangers surrounding him. The movie never explores the origin of this character in depth. There are no complicated celestial hierarchies, no old gods, and no long mythological stories. Instead, it just says that he is the known protector of Earthrealm, which is clear and simple. It is a well thought out beginning that supports the story instead of taking away from it, and because of that clarity, it has an unexpected and lasting effect. In television and animated series like Mortal Kombat Conquest, Defenders of the Realm, and Legacy, Raiden is the reigning protective deity, albeit with major differences in his demeanor and abilities. Conquest gives us a more upbeat, sarcastic, hands-on Raiden, still mentoring Kung Lao, but with a looser personality than the games usually allow. Defenders of the Realm turns him into a more direct animated guardian figure who helps monitor threats against Earthrealm. Legacy goes much stranger, dropping Raiden into a mental hospital where his divinity is mistaken for delusion before he escapes in a burst of supernatural power. Tadanobu Asano's Raiden in the 2021 Mortal Kombat movie is more aloof, a fierce protector who gathers fighters to his temple and enforces the rules of the tournament. The movie does scale down his full divinity into more of a cosmic overseer type of setting, but it maintains his essential background as an ancient god dedicated to protecting Earth. The character's full backstory has yet to be developed, but Asano returns in Mortal Kombat 2, currently scheduled for May 8, 2026, so this film version of Raiden is expected to continue within that Guardian framework. Crossovers and non-canonical interpretations. Raiden's distinctive appearance, the unique conical hat, the bright eyes, and the constant lightning around him has lived on for a long time after Mortal Kombat, making him one of the most recognizable characters in gaming. There are not that many video game characters who are so recognizable at first glance as Raiden. He needs no introduction, no background, no clarification, one look is enough. This is why he has been a perfect choice for crossover roles that have been woven into entirely different realms without losing any of himself. Injustice 2 has a version of the Thunder God pulled into the DC universe, allowing players the delicious possibility of seeing Raiden fight iconic characters like Superman and Batman. It was a crossover that worked because Raiden is a character who can hold his own anywhere, real or fictional. He has also been a fun Easter egg in sports titles like NBA Jam Tournament Edition and NFL Blitz, appearances that have nothing to do with Outworld or Elder Gods, and show how far his image has spread outside his original franchise. None of these crossovers or appearances change his backstory or hold significant authority. Instead, they serve as proof of something more straightforward and perhaps more revealing. Familiarity with Mortal Kombat's lore is not necessary to identify Raiden. The outline of the Thunder God is self-explanatory. Well, it has definitely been a long video, and even at the end, Raiden may still be one of the moral anchors of the franchise, but he is also the one who keeps damaging the timeline in his desperate attempts to preserve it. In 1992, he was the lightning deity in the conical hat who entered a tournament to protect Earthrealm. Then, in 2023's Mortal Kombat 1, Liu Kang's new timeline reimagined him completely. no longer the ancient god choosing champions, but a humble Fengjian farmer chosen to become Earthrealm's champion. Anyway, that is it for the video. Which version of character do you think is truest to Raiden? Is it the unreachable god, the regretful time changer, or the man who had to prove himself before carrying the thunder? And what is your favorite Raiden origin? Hit the like button, don't forget to subscribe, and make sure to share your answers and other thoughts in the comments section below. See you all next time!